Hello, I'm Bohdan Nahaylo, Chief Editor of the Kyiv Post. As you know, I like to think out loud in video recordings, but today I'm going to do it jointly with a very special guest, Michael Bociurkiw, Global Affairs Analyst, specialist, writer, commentator, often talking about international affairs and Ukraine on various TV channels and on various sites. But today, I want to ask Michael, welcome. I want to ask Michael to share with me his thoughts about some of the burning issues in Ukraine at the moment, particularly related to the latest corruption scandals. I've just been watching you over the last few days, on various screens, whether it's CNN or CNBC or whatever, BBC. What are the big stories of the day as we speak at the end of January 2024 that you're covering?
It's good to be back in Kyiv. I'm temporarily based in Odessa, but I kind of feel schizophrenic because I'm toggling depending on what the producers want from the various TV outlets. It's either now the Israel-Hamas war and what's happening in Gaza, or it's what's happening here in Ukraine. We all know what's happening in Israel and Gaza. I'll leave that for now. But here in Ukraine, top of mind right now. In fact, I just did an interview on CNN this morning with Rosemary Church, is the military procurement scandal. We're talking about eye-popping figures of about $40 million. These were supposed to be for about 100,000 pieces of artillery that went to a little-known Lviv company called Lviv Arsenal. If I'm not mistaken, 4 Ukrainians and 1 international involved. Anyway, long story short, that money went from the Ministry of Defense to this little-known company. Reminds me of the COVID contracts. And that was the end of the story. The shells never arrived. And now it's taken a while, but these guys have been charged. They're raided by the SBU. Apparently, one of them is getting ready to leave the country. Yeah, so things are a bit murky right now. There was a court appearance by one of the suspects. Apparently, $7 million bail was requested, and the court rejected that. I don't know, Bohdan. It seems to me these guys involved are a real flight risk. In fact, one of them was preparing to leave the country. Now, from what I've read about this particular incident, the maximum these guys will get is about 10 or 12 years in the slammer. I bet you if you went right now onto the street and asked the average Ukrainian what the penalty should be, it would probably be life, if not worse. And I think this is the only way that these big-time scammers imagine during time of war, when so many thousand have died, gave their blood for Ukraine. You have people, these greedy people, former government officials, a lot of them with their honey in their hand in the cookie jar, taking money for themselves. The penalties should be way, way more than they are now. Of course, one might argue the reason these things happen is because government salaries are sold, that sort of thing, but that's no excuse. I mean, at the end of the day, what these crooks are doing is they're costing Ukrainian lives ultimately on the front line.
They're also damaging Ukraine's credibility very seriously at this critical moment.
At a time when $61 billion is on the line in the US and another 50 billion or so in the EU. And this is a big thing. It actually came out during the Republican presidential debates that you had Vivek, what's his name, who was dropped out. But he said, yeah, why are we giving money to Ukraine if it goes into the pockets of an autocrat to buy another car or an oligarch? And this is being repeated by MAGA Republicans on social media, on TV. And that's the perception people have. And the other thing I should say, it's a bit controversial, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway, is it seems to me as well what has been happening recently is the presidential administration, I think they consider themselves as ultimate communicators, have cut off the legs of the foreign ministry. We have excellent ambassadors out there. I don't see them.
Well, we don't. We don't have anybody in the UK.
Right, and no one in the UK at a crucial time. So that they also have to empower ambassadors overseas to do a lot more lobbying, a lot more appearances on TV to tell the Ukrainian story, because otherwise this money could be held up, and that's going to be absolutely disastrous.
But Mike, you come here a lot, and now you've, in a sense, relocated to Odessa. Okay, we have these issues, very serious issues with corruption, and I'm sure there are going to be more stories like this breaking. But your general feel what is the message to the outside world, particularly to Congress or to
Sure.
Brussels? Is corruption so bad that Ukraine shouldn't be helped?
No, it should be helped. And look, just before coming here, before going on air, CNN this morning, I did look at one of the more recent EU kind of corruption reports on Ukraine, and they actually recorded very, very good progress, especially during a time of martial law, especially when there's a $5 billion gap, monthly gap in the budget, especially when a lot of people have left. These institutions are still functioning, which is incredible. The courts are, I'm told, having about 100% throughput of cases. So that's all very good. However, the other thing we have to remind people is that a lot of the money that, for example, comes to the United States is not being loaded onto pallets and being flown over here and going into the state treasury. A lot of it actually stays in the United States and goes into the accounts of, Northrop Grumman and, defense manufacturers. So, if there are fears about that and the money that does come here is accountable. One more thing, I have to really emphasize this: that 61 billion that the U.S. was meant to give by now was not only for military needs, it was also for state budget support, paying teachers' salaries, paying pensions, for infrastructure, and also for humanitarian needs. I am now told that in the coming week or two, if that money doesn't come, and it doesn't look like it will, the state will be unable to pay the salaries of teachers or pensions. That's a very scary
So, a case of dire straits.
demonstration.
Look, when we're talking about corruption, I suppose we also have to mention these very serious, high-level, high-profile cases involving the arrest of senior businessmen, financiers, etc. The Mazepa case right now, one of several that is in the news here
Yeah.
in Ukraine. Do you see a connection? Is it part of corruption, or is it somebody trying to, shall we say, profit from the war?
Yeah, well, that was a very interesting case. The head of Concord Capital, he was actually on his way to Davos to help sell the Ukraine story when he was stopped at the border. I understand this is a case going back quite some years ago. It's a very flimsy case. It's You wonder, why is it coming up at this certain time during war? Why are they going after him when they should have known darn well that this is going to make big international headlines? It did. And again, without the Ukrainian officials giving the narrative, the backstory as to what's going on here, it looks overseas as this was a targeted kind of nab, and that they're getting this guy because someone didn't like him up in the floors of power. So, you know, and this is also happening at a time when a lot of diaspora organizations or others are holding these investment conferences on rebuilding Ukraine. What kind of message does that send to the international business community when people of that stature are being nabbed again for a case that doesn't seem to have very strong legs?
Okay, Mike, we'll stop there. Thank you very much for the reporting you do and for telling the truth,
Thank you very much.
informing the outside world about realities and not just presenting a rosy picture.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I've been speaking to Michael Bociurkiw, a world affairs specialist, writer, commentator.